Hi, I'm Denise Whitehead from Queen's University of Charlotte. This is my digital presentation for COM 613. Some organizations really know how to stand the test of time. They establish themselves on a clear set of values, a good mission statement, they reach a stable audience, and they kind of build from there. Rotary International is one of those organizations that has stood the test of time for over 100 years, 112 years. Now, if you've read any of my discussion posts in this class or others, if you've read any of my blog posts or anything else, you probably already know that I'm a Rotarian. It's an organization that I joined only 6 years ago, but it's really become an important part of my life because of all the great things it does, not just in my local community, but all over the world. Now, at first, you might not think I'm a typical Rotarian. First of all, I'm a woman. Second of all, I'm under 50 years old. That's right, for a very long time, a Rotarian in America was typically thought of as an old white guy. But Rotary is slowly changing that idea of what a typical Rotarian is. Well, at least they're trying to. But in order to understand all of that, first you have to understand exactly what Rotary is. Rotary began with these four guys who ran businesses in Chicago. They realized that other businesses they were dealing with weren't always the most ethical, so they struggled to find decent people to work with. They began meeting weekly, adopted a four-way test to hold themselves accountable, and rotated their meetings between their offices, which is where the name Rotary came from. They decided that ethical business dealings were a good start, but they also needed to improve their community, so they started service projects. In the past 112 years, that idea spread around the globe so that business people now meet weekly to network, improve their local communities through various service projects, and participate in global efforts like hunger, clean water, and eradicating polio. Now, 112 later, we face this image crisis that Rotary is for old white men. I guess when you've been around for over a century, changing your image to keep up with the times is difficult, but it is incredibly important if the organization is going to continue to thrive and meet its objectives in the world. So a few years ago, Rotary finally realized they might be in a communications crisis and decided they needed to update their image. Since then, they have worked hard to show a different side of Rotary that reaches out to new generations of Rotarians. Let's take a look at Rotary's re-imaging from Goffman's theoretical perspective of impression management, framing, footing, and face. Let's start with impression management. Rotary intended to reach a younger group of people who really want to be involved in their own communities and have a global impact. This is a fantastic idea because the only way Rotary continues to make an impact in the world is to convince a younger generation to become involved. However, Rotary has always had this idea that you have to be prominent in your business community in order to do that. Often that unintended message is that you have to have a lot of money to be a part of the organization. This is why many of our members are older, more established, and financially independent business people. Reaching a younger generation just starting a career often means they're spending their money by starting a family or buying a house. Rotary still struggles with this conflict of goals by expecting our members to make donations to projects like End Polio Now on top of regular club dues. Rotary is trying to change this image by allowing clubs to establish their own dues structure and encouraging fundraising efforts to compensate for members who can't afford to make thousands of dollars of donations a year. Goffman's perspective on framing plays a big part on how Rotary reaches its audience. Until recently, Rotary's main method of communication was completely by word of mouth. Older members of our organization felt strongly that doing good in the world shouldn't be advertised, it should just be. In other words, we don't want to toot our own horn, we just want to do good for the sake of doing good. And that framing worked for a long time. But now that method isn't working to reach younger members. Rotary decided to begin advertising and chose social media as their primary tool. They realized that the people they wanted to attract spent more time on social media sites than they did reading the newspaper, listening to radio, or even watching TV. The new outreach has an impact on younger people wanting to get involved and makes them feel more welcomed. So let's get down to the actual messaging and look at footing. As principal of the message, Rotary needed to change their messaging to be attractive to younger Rotarians while still honoring the mission of the organization. After 112 years, Rotary has grown from just four guys to a very large organization with a Rotary International president at the top. However, our organization is a little different in that the president only spends 1 year in his post. So the Rotary International executive staff and committees really establish long-term messaging like the shift to promote Rotary to younger generations. The actual author of their message is the Rotary International Communications Committee. According to Rotary.org, this committee guides and advises the board on effective ways to communicate what Rotary is and what we do to Rotarians, clubs, and districts, and the general public. Crafting this message to reach so many different demographics is a highly important part of the process. However, just as important is finding the right animator of the message. Rotary really has to reach far and wide to find many different animators that will reach their vast audience in ways that can be understood by different cultures and age groups. We saw this play out at the recent International Convention in Atlanta. During one General Assembly, we saw our current RI president, John Germ, an older white guy, a young athlete and polio survivor who was born in India, Bill Gates, actor Ashton Kutcher, and WWE wrestler John Cena. They were certainly reaching out to all sorts of demographics with their messaging that day. In fact, throughout the world, you'll see celebrities famous in their local areas helping to promote the End Polio Now program, like these.
Created using Powtoon.
So let's move on to the final part of Goffman's theory, face. Brown and Levinson say that face is something that is emotionally invested and that can be lost, maintained, or enhanced, and must be constantly attended to. Rotary has really established a clear understanding of intertwining emotions, brand management, and understanding of demographics in their presentation of positive face through the communications program. Aside from the End Polio Now campaign with familiar celebrities, most of the communications shows Rotarians of all ages from all over the world actually doing activities like vaccinations, working with children, installing a well in a far-off community. You don't see those boring check presentation photos very much anymore. You see happy, excited, and engaging Rotarians working together to make the world better. Rotary finally understands that our positive face needs to be continually communicated, not just to the public, but also to keep our members involved and engaged. So what strategies can we take from this situation? First, understanding the current image and the key points that have to be retained is important. Rotary identified that the good deeds done throughout the world is the primary message they wish to communicate. Business networking and ethics is still very important to how we operate. However, reaching younger members involves emotions, community, and engagement more prominently. Other organizations can take that strategy by identifying key messages and avoiding conflicting messages. Another strategy is to ensure the messaging is directed towards the intended audience. Rotary understood that their intended audience, the younger generation, is far more engaged with social media than traditional advertising methods and focused their efforts there. They also continue to expand into newer social media and other platforms, like using virtual reality to present a polio story. Rotary's footing strategy is important because it is such a large organization. Rotary International crafts a message and develops tools and resources that get used not only on a global scale, but also at a district and club level as well. Consistency is key, but it is also important to train clubs and districts on how to maintain that consistency. The last strategy Rotary uses is to always present a positive face. Rotary has worked hard for over 100 years to be a respectable and ethical organization that does amazing things in the world. It has not had to save face on many occasions because of the ethical premises it was built on. The strategy that Rotary uses and can be studied by other organizations is the consistency of ensuring the message is maintained throughout changing political and socioeconomic crises throughout the world. So 6 years ago, I joined this club and really didn't know what to expect. I was invited by another Rotarian, and my first impressions were that it was a little out of touch, but trying to do some good things in the world, so I stuck around. Thankfully, 2 years later, Rotary released its new communications resources, including a redesigned logo, more engaging materials. I've personally been able to see a shift in younger members joining clubs and becoming more involved. I'm not sure if the Communications Committee at Rotary International followed Goffman's theory step by step, but it sure seems like they had studied it quite a bit.